It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello, and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that is bound and determined to make a stupid pun each and every week. V is out this week, so there is no one here to stop me. Instead, I'm joined in studio by friend of the show and queer activist, Atom the Atheist. Tonight we're going to be discussing chest binding and safety, especially for our trans and NB teens. And lines are open now, so give us a call at 512-686-0279, 512-686-0279. Adam, thanks so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
I make YouTube videos.
Fantastic.
So I make atheist content on YouTube, and I kind of make it whenever I have something very interesting to talk about. I'm also growing, I like to think, my sub-community on Twitter, where I'm very accepting of the LGBTQ community, obviously, because I'm part of it. And I'm looking to sort of strengthen the bonds between the atheist community and the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a huge part of what we do here, so very excited to have you on board, and definitely want to encourage people to check you out at Atom the Atheist on YouTube and on Twitter. But with that, let's jump into the interview. We're talking about chest binding, so let's start at the very beginning. What the hell is this?
Yeah, so chest binding is a way to reduce your feelings of dysphoria. Mm-hmm. For me, I experience a lot more chest dysphoria than anywhere else because it's such a visible part of your body. It's so noticed by, it's so perceived by the people around you. Mm-hmm. So binding is a good way to sort of reduce that feeling.
Yeah, we're talking about, I guess, sort of flattening or making less obvious breasts, basically.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the cool things about the day and age we live in now is that there are so many binders to choose from, so it can be a bit overwhelming if you're brand new to this and you're looking for what type is going to work for you. In reality, you really have to just try a few different ones and see where you end up. But yeah, it's really great. I have had a lot of personal satisfaction with binding.
Yeah, so again, this is a strategy then to get away from these feelings of dysphoria, this idea that your body doesn't line up with who you are, doesn't present to the world the real version of yourself, and wanting to kind of, I guess, take ownership of how you look to other people a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay. Well, obviously you mentioned trans folks, and I think that that's an important place to start, but who is doing this? I mean, what's going on here?
I've even seen some people who are cis who do it as well, simply because they're looking for a certain look and fashion, or our non-binary communities do it as well, to suit, either how they feel that day or how they wish to be perceived on a daily basis. So honestly, it's not just binary trans people who are binding. It's actually kind of going into the LGBTQ community as something that is, you don't have to be by the book, completely trans. You're able to do it if you want to. And so I think that's cool, because I think that, for everybody, you should be able to do it if you want to, because sometimes it can be really fun.
Yeah, and I think that it is great when folks of different stripes are willing to kind of jump in and feel comfortable participating in this culture, because so often, how many emails and phone calls have V and I gotten just in the last several months on this show as people are saying, am I trans? Am I trans enough? Am I queer in these different ways? And wanting, I guess, just permission to take some sort of tangible step, and feeling like it's an unwelcome space, like maybe they're not, they don't need it desperately enough. And so I love this invitation to play around with your gender identity, play around with your appearance, play around with the way you dress. Remember that, we're all just monkeys in fancy coats, and that's okay.
Yeah, there is no litmus test that you have to pass to be able to bind or to challenge, sort of like the gender stereotypes. Like everyone can do it. And I think that we're all a little more free when we play around with that. So you don't have to be trans enough, or you don't have to like check all these boxes. You can be exactly who you are, in whatever capacity that is, and you can do it. And I'm not going to give you any crap for that. I want you to do. I want you to play around with it. Just yeah, it's a good thing, and I think that when it's done safely, it can be a huge benefit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, we're talking about this as a piece of fashion, and that has something that has existed for as long as humans have existed. We can certainly look back at, corsets in the 1800s and these different versions of this idea, but it feels to me like in the last maybe 10, 15 years, maybe with the rise of the internet or just the visibility of trans culture or whatever, something has happened, and this has gone from a bunch of people sort of cobbling together, or I guess tailoring their own products to a huge market.
Yeah.
What has been causing that, or where is all this coming from or going to?
I think that it's just, in the beginning, like when we look back on, sort of like the history of corsets and things like that, it was very much so designed for a certain market, and that was, at the time, it would have been cis women. It was made to be more pleasing. It was made to be more attractive. Binding isn't necessarily about whether it's overtly attractive or not. It's completely for you, and I'm sure
what you feel is attractive or how you want to present to the world.
Exactly, it's about how you want to present to the world. It isn't necessarily a fashion statement that is like a trend worldwide.
Sure,
it can become that because of how popular it is, but it isn't something being enforced upon us by beauty standards or something.
Right. I mean, isn't it interesting to think about cis women in particular, like wanting to bind their breasts to make them seem smaller 200 years ago, when now we're told that women are supposed to be completely the opposite. And it just goes to show that, yeah, this is all fashion, and it does matter. It is important to so many people, and I think that that's a beautiful thing. But again, it's all a little bit of silliness. I mean, all clothes are really just performative, and that's okay in and of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. That's why I say make fashion sort of your slave. Like, you wear what you want to wear, do what you want to do, because as he said earlier, we're all just monkeys dressed in nice suits. So go for it. Like, you have nothing to lose.
Yeah, so it is all made up. The points don't matter, but I know that it's also something that's really meaningful to a lot of folks. I work with a number of clients who, are urgently telling me the story about the first time maybe a cis woman got a short haircut that, presented this butch identity to the world, or the first time a trans woman wore a dress in public, or these kinds of stories are coming into my office every day. I'm curious about your experiences binding.
Yeah, so I just recently got a new binder, and the first time that I put it on, I got it, I ordered it from Amazon. It got there. I was so excited. And the first time I put it on, it was the right binder for me. And I felt euphoric, honestly, because it worked so well and it made me feel so comfortable. I had a binder before, and it just wasn't quite right for either my body type or just what I was looking for. So it was amazing when you find the right binder, or when that first time that you cut your hair. I like to call that gender euphoria, and it is
I like that
such
line.
a wonderful feeling. And as you continue your journey with binders, with presenting yourself in the way that you want to be seen by the world, it really does make a difference, and it's empowering. And that's something that I'm just so excited about. And that's why I like talking about binders, and that's why I like sharing the things that I have encountered that get me excited, because there are so many products out there. There's so many different ways that you can make yourself more comfortable and feel the way you want to feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that there are also a lot of safety concerns, and I think it's important to mention that. I'm also a little anxious, I want to admit, just about approaching that topic, because while there are some legitimate safety concerns and some very simple and practical steps to avoid those risks and dangers, it feels as if safety concerns are a political football. You know, I read so many articles getting ready for this conversation in which it felt like it was just a way to demonize gender expression, to demonize trans folks in general, to talk about our wayward youth and these destructive things they're doing to their bodies. And frankly, I've had a lot of conversations with the parents of children that I am seeing in my practice who are really anxious about these things. So where is the actual danger? Is there any?
You know, most of the danger comes from home remedies. That was where we had a lot of problems come up because of ace bandages or duct tape or saran wrap. Like, there were a lot of creative solutions that could cause a lot of problems for you down the road if you did it to an extreme. Today, binders are made with safety in mind. And first of all, home remedies, while sometimes necessary for you to feel comfortable, are not always the best route to take. So it is always better to find a binder made by a company who is thinking about you and your safety. So when it comes to, if you purchase a binder and you have one, when it comes to safety, you can't wear it all the time. Especially if you get extreme compression, because there are levels of compression. There are different lengths. There are some that are tanks. There are some that are more like sports bra. There are some that are like tank tops, and the length goes all the way down to slim your sides as well. And whenever you're getting into a lot of compression, you really do need to be aware of how well can you breathe, because if you can't breathe deeply, you know that you are squishing the parts of you that do not like to be squished.
Should not be squished, yeah.
Right. And so it's always good to take most places you're going to buy a binder from will recommend that you spend at least 8 to 12 hours a day not in the binder. So as uncomfortable as it is sometimes to take the binder off, because once you have it on, you don't want to take it off. A lot of the times you really don't want to, because it feels so comfortable. You feel like you're presenting the way you want to, but you really have to take it off when you go to sleep or when you're at home, and just give your organs and your body a chance to breathe.
A little bit of a breather, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so some practical do's and don'ts. I heard, there are various levels of compression. You want to get the right level for you. We're not sleeping in it, and making sure to wear it for, I guess, 10 to 12 hours at most is kind of a target.
Right.
What are some of the other, just pro tips or important do's and don'ts I missed there?
Well, one that I haven't mentioned yet is keep your binder clean. The other one, too, is if you're not taking it off as much as you should be, that also means that you're not cleaning it as much as you should be, too. And it's difficult because, like as I referenced earlier, once you have that binder on, you don't want to take it off. Because especially if you have a lot of top dysphoria, you want to keep it on.
Yeah, and I guess to clarify, when you're saying you don't want to take it off, you're not being prescriptive. You're talking about your experience of how once you're in there, it feels right. Exactly.
And so if that's at least been my experience, and so I have to really be proactive in my health, because it's easy to think, oh, it's fine. Like, I can breathe fine. Like, I'm not having any issues. But you really have to make sure that you're cleaning it, that you're giving yourself time to breathe, because that's going to set you up for success. They also recommend that you do not get extremely intoxicated or extremely high or whatever you're doing. They recommend that you don't do that with your binder on, because in the case that you are having any issues with breathing, that can make the problem worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you personally discovered anything that you just think is a good idea to avoid? I mean, as you've tried different things, is there something that just a mistake you won't make again?
Frankly, I haven't, because I try to be as proactive as possible in following the recommendations from these manufacturers.
Okay.
So if you're following those for the most part, now there are some people who may notice that you might have like a rash or something because it's really on there, and
Can be some skin irritation.
Right, your skin can get irritated. So some people will use basically this like body glide to avoid chafing. Some people put that on before. I haven't really experienced that, but really, if you follow the recommendations, most likely you're going to be okay. But you might notice something, and that it might pop up that you weren't expecting. And I'm sure that if you do some more research, because thankfully the trans community is very open about binding and very happy to help assist people who are new to it, because we just get excited whenever we see someone who wants to bind getting into it. We're like, yeah, let's help them out.
Yeah, no, I want to mention in particular, transguys.com had a really great, just very simple, very straightforward introduction with a number of good tips and policies. And there will be links to that in the footnotes to the episode. I definitely encourage people to check that out. But to really just do your homework. The other thing I kind of heard you say is, you're following manufacturer's instructions. You want to buy from a manufacturer who has your safety in mind. What does that mean? I mean, how do you know when you're shopping online that you're getting a product that's of a quality and that's going to be safe?
Right. Honestly, you have to do a little bit of research into who it is that you're looking at, because there are companies that make compression shirts that aren't just for the trans community. There are a lot of cis men out there who want to slim up their torso. There's a lot of cis women out there who are looking to essentially do a sort of a corset thing. And then they also know that they have a trans community or a non-binary community who are interested in this product, so they'll make that too. One brand that their binder did not personally work for me, but again, it's absolutely up to the person and how you feel with it. GC2B is a great resource for that. They claim to give binders out to the trans and non-binary community out for free.
They have a number of programs to offer free or low-cost products to folks in the community that need it, which is a beautiful thing to be a part of.
Absolutely. And so even though their binder didn't personally work for me, I am still very happy to have purchased one from them because I want to support that.
Sure.
And so I especially like looking for the companies where it is trans or non-binary people who are making this product for their communities. Because then you know that they are very familiar with the safety risk and also just some of the
issues that face that community.
Right. And so they're much better at, in my opinion, they'll be much better at addressing those concerns and creating a product that's just better overall for the community.
Do you have any favorite tips? I mean, things that you learned the hard way or just that you're excited to know and wish you'd known sooner?
Take your binder off.
Yeah.
That personally, really, truly, it's a very important thing. And again, maybe not everyone struggles with that, but you have to take it off sometimes.
Well, and then I guess not to belabor the point, but what are some of the dangers of failing to heed this advice? I mean, what happens when people are a little bit less careful? Right. I mean, you could really run into a few different issues. I mean, anytime that you are in a situation where you can't breathe as deeply, you could be causing an issue later on down the road. You might lose consciousness at times. I really don't have all of all of them listed out in my mind, but with some more research, you could find. I don't want to get too much into like the scary category because obviously most people, even if you're kind of like, running a bit on the riskier side, you might still, you'll probably be okay. You might have some issues that other people don't. But there are cases where people have lost consciousness or needed to get some other care for another issue that was caused by binding too much. But just be safe. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd like to go ahead and jump on the phones with Chris if we could.
Yeah.
Ready to take a call? All right. Chris, what can we do for you tonight? All right, Chris, I'm going to go ahead and put you back on hold, see if we can get in touch with you here in just a moment. Okay, moving on from there. I did want to go ahead and share this email that came in earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and read that off for you and give you a chance to respond if you could. Hi, friends. Poly stuff. Gave fiance a free pass. She gave me one in exchange. Had a bad date. Life moves on. After telling somebody we knew about this poly thing, we were invited into kink. Turns out we're very into it. For me, my first day of play was something that has driven my confidence through the roof. I feel much more energetic and active at work, and I'm able to get up in the mornings. These are the things I thought were symptoms of depression, which now are mostly gone. They don't seem to be attacking me now. I may still go to therapy, but it doesn't feel so necessary anymore. Is it reasonable to think this internally as therapy for myself? Is it possible that maybe the particular form of kink ended up addressing things that were root causes of depression-like symptoms, insecurity, things like that? I'm truly shocked at how much one short day of this has made me feel alive again, and I just need some friends who know things about sex to help me understand if you can.
I'm really excited that they have discovered that they're into this. That's cool. That's awesome. The happiness that can come along with sort of tapping into something new and the excitement, that's fantastic. I do believe that you're better qualified to address the therapy
the
part.
therapy and the kink of it all. No, for sure. Well, yeah, I guess I would just start by saying congratulations. This is a great question to be asking yourself. Am I going to call it therapy? Sure. Yeah. And the reason I'm okay with saying that is because the word therapy means kind of anything and everything and a little bit nothing. But anything that we find value in and anything that can provide healing, I think that we can feel comfortable calling it a therapy. So am I comfortable with comparing it to or using it as a replacement for working with a trained professional counselor or these different things? Honestly, kind of, yeah, to that as well. Just because depression and anxiety, these different things are personal experiences. And so if something is helping get you over that hump, then I think that that's fantastic in and of itself. I do want to give a number of words of caution. I think that folks in the kink community will be quick to point out that your hormones, your emotions, your experience, your endorphins can really fluctuate and shift a lot throughout the experience, especially when you're not necessarily used to those rhythms. And so if, depending on, you say just kink in general, depending on the type of kink that you're participating in, especially if there's a lot of impact or breath play or just different forms of pain, that can cause a real haywire situation with your endorphins and with your body's experience, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I just hope that you're bearing that in mind when you're making any lifestyle choices based on it. And then I would say from there that, anytime we're talking about canceling antidepressants or anything along those lines, we want to be very much in touch with the medical professional that prescribed those things and taking them according to the prescription and being careful about just jumping off of them. With all of those caveats out of the way, I guess I am just excited that this is scratching you where you itch. And a lot of times, kink can be a way of eroticizing our fears, taking things that genuinely concern us and that really put damage and destruction in our lives and taking a little bit of ownership of them. So if that's what's happening for you here, fantastic. I absolutely think that that can be transformative and incredibly therapeutic. So I'm really excited to hear it. I don't know that you can necessarily market this as a therapy, but to hear that it's making this kind of impact in your life honestly does not surprise me, and it doesn't concern me. I think it's an incredibly exciting thing. So good on you. We'd love to hear more. I'd love to know what particular kink this writer has stumbled across, because while I feel like I have seen them all, I know that I can't spend a week on the internet without stumbling into something new that I'm just like, wow, somebody gets turned on by that. Good for them. Great. And if you found the thing that turns you on and transforms your life, then I don't know, but maybe it's something I need to get into as well.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty cool the way you talk
Right?
about it.
All right. Well, it seems that we've got Chris back on the line, so I'm going to give
Awesome.
that another try before we jump back into it. Chris, are you able to hear us now? Not so
Yes,
much.
yes.
Oh, yes. Howdy.
Hi.
Hey, what can we do for you tonight?
Man, well, actually, after listening to that, your response to that last email,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of it changes my question a bit slightly, but you'll get a picture after listening to it and watching your show, a number of times. I know you can help me in this area.
Ah, well, glad to hear it. What's on your mind?
I recently, told her about which I'm trying to figure out now. Is it a kink? Do I have a kink for bisexuality? Like, it started as a kid by getting into porn. And, like you just said, with the internet, one thing leads to another. And I remember a time where anything gay or homosexual would gross me out, like most average, your average typical, as you say, cis male.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I want to clarify a couple of things there for you, which is to start off with, usually we use the word orientation when we're talking about bisexuality, just because a kink is a wrinkle. It's a small aspect of our sexuality, and it's not necessarily about who we're interested in or the basic building blocks or fundamental components of who we are. And also, it's not as mutable. Our orientation might be a little bit fluid, but generally speaking, we see that as something that's pretty well set in for life. And, you may feel more or less comfortable with that as you explore sexually and as you open up to things, and being exposed to different things online can be a part of that. But I definitely wouldn't say that the internet is causing any of those things. Looks like we're having a little bit of issues with the phone, so I'm going to go ahead and jump back into the conversation since I don't know where that was headed. But just to say that, as you're exploring your sexuality, I hope that you are open and accepting to what you find in yourself and in others. And we definitely encourage you on that journey.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. So first of all, we talked a little bit about how chest binding is not just part of the trans community and that different people are welcome to be a part of it, but how does the, readily availableness of these products and the fact that that's changed, how has it maybe affected the trans community, or how has it maybe become a symbol or just a part of that culture?
I mean, you're talking about the availability of these now?
Yeah, just the ready existence. It's not just, electrical tape and ace bandages anymore, and people are able to safely, and I think in a more socially acceptable sort of way, have access to these things.
I know for me, it's been a boon. It has made such a difference. From most of my life, I realize now, because at one point I didn't understand enough about the trans community and the sort of accessories that we use. I didn't know enough about them to have an idea of how they might benefit me. Mm-hmm. And in fact, binding would have been something that I would have been happier doing my entire life. So now that I'm sort of stepping into this and realizing the amazing variety of products there are out there to help me feel the way that I want to feel. It is a huge boon, and it's such a boost to my mental health to have such a variety. I can play around with it. It can be fun. Dysphoria is so uncomfortable, most of the time. It's just it's this ever-present sort of just itch that you just can't get rid of, right? And so I think that bringing some excitement into it is actually kind of relieving, because I get excited whenever I'm looking at this variety that I have, and I think that it's just a cool twist to put on it. And obviously dysphoria isn't going to, it's not this thing that you can just magically evaporate. It's something that I will probably have to some degree for the most of my life, but sort of taking that negative and learning how to roll it over into something a little more positive is really fantastic.
Yeah, so in many ways, this is not just a solution to a problem, but a way of sort of embracing a whole culture or a whole issue. I'm not sure I have it quite right.
Yeah, no, I think that culture is kind of is like probably how I would phrase it, to be honest, because it is, and it's while it comes from a place of something that's a little more negative, like dysphoria, it's fun. And talking about it, sharing this cool thing that you have, talking about how excited you are to have this awesome binder, it brings something better into it.
On just a very practical level, can you talk a little bit about the way it's changed, I guess, your fashion overall? I mean, having the option to wear a different type of shirt, and concerns about is a white Oxford going to show through with like a black undergarment, and just things along those lines. How have you been navigating all of that?
Yeah, I would say that especially since I have this binder, I feel much more comfortable not being super layered. Because before, I would always have a lot of layers. I was almost always in a hoodie or something just to kind of make me feel more comfortable. Now that I have this binder and it makes me feel so good, I feel much more comfortable just like playing around more with my personal fashion and playing around a bit more with not being quite so layered.
It's giving you a lot more options to start with.
Right. And obviously, like you mentioned, like the white shirt, like that is something that is kind of a pain when you really like this shirt and you can't wear it. So I always try to get my binders in like a nude color. So hopefully if the material's thick enough, it won't show through. But yeah, that does affect some of the shirts that I wear.
No, I definitely hear that. In I guess what other ways, as you wear it, some days and not others, and at certain times of the day and different things, does it feel a little bit like somebody with glasses who, puts on contacts and everybody's like baffled by their appearance or something along those lines, where all of a sudden on Tuesday you look different than Monday? Have you been getting that kind of feedback or discomfort from folks?
That's actually a really great analogy to that. That is really kind of like what it is. I don't let people see me without my binder personally. I think my wife would be the only one. Obviously we live together, so me hiding from her wouldn't work for me. But yeah, I mean it is. It's such a that was a great way to put it. Yeah, it's like contacts and glasses, and my binder are my contacts.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad to hear you enjoy the way you look and that you're feeling confident and all of that. I guess any other final tips or just things that you would hope that the world would know about these things?
Yeah, honestly, just really put the research in to what you're getting, and my biggest tip is don't feel pressured that the first binder has to work, or don't feel overwhelmed by the options. Binders, there are some that are more expensive. Me personally, I found some for what I consider to be relatively cheap for what it is that I'm getting and how specialized it kind of is. But just approach it as relaxed as possible, because whenever I first started getting into starting to think about getting a binder, it was very overwhelming for me. And I felt very pressured that the first one had to work because I'm spending money on it.
Right.
And then in my mind I was like, oh, if this binder doesn't work, if this binder is uncomfortable or I don't feel right, then none of the binders are going to work or make me feel comfortable. That's not true at all.
Yeah, I think so often with these types of issues, there is a certain sense that any particular item or any particular step along the road is going to be that magical thing that makes dysphoria disappear, that makes depression disappear, that makes things all come together. And when we put that kind of weight on what is effectively a garment, it can definitely be problematic. And so I love the idea of encouraging people to say, like, this is a great thing. I really like it, but also it's fine. Try this one, try that one. This one might be better, but there truly is no magic in any of these things. And to be willing to, I guess, experiment a little.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm always encouraging people whenever they're opening up to a new experience or being willing to try something on that they always be willing to commit early on to doing it at least twice. Because that first time, if you especially with a new kink or something along those lines, if there's all of this pressure to get it right the first time, and this has to be magical, and I've had this fantasy for 10 years, and I'm finally having my opportunity, and when you put all of that weight on something, it's the best way to make sure you don't enjoy it.
Yes, exactly. I could not say it better.
Okay. Well, I've got another email I'd like to run by you if I could. Okay, it starts, my 15-year-old sister is still a part of the church my parents are congregated in. I personally think it's a cult, but that's another conversation. They go to their church 4 days a week almost, and my stepdad even teaches the youth. His teachings are very crazy. My sister told me that one of the pastor's sons has been having a thing with her since she was 13. He would have been 18 at the time. She told me a few months ago that he would send her nudes and she would send some in return. They would have phone sex, and he even touched her. She swears they didn't have sex, but even if they didn't, I'm absolutely disgusted. My sister got a new phone shortly after I found out, and there was no evidence. After my sister told me all of this, she ignored me for weeks. I wanted justice, but I got ignored and I had no proof. So I told my parents, thinking that they would either leave the church or get proof to call the police. But no, they didn't confront them for like 2 weeks. And my stepdad tried telling my sister that she was just as guilty because she consented. When they finally confronted him, my sister apologized to them, and then he apologized to my parents. His only punishment was to not play in the worship group for like 3 weeks. I'm angry, I'm disgusted, I'm pissed off, and I don't know what to do. My parents refuse to do anything because they care too much about their church. What do? I just need advice. Should I just move on?
Wow.
Yeah, that's very important stuff. Not quite as exciting, I suppose, as therapeutic kinks, but a story that I think a lot of us are realizing is more common than we've been allowed to think for a long time.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, when I hear of these situations, I wish that I were more surprised. I'm obviously not happy about hearing these. It's rough, but it does happen a lot more than what we might think it does. That's one of
it's a lot to just lay at your feet. I certainly don't mean to, because there are so many pieces to this. I mean, there is so what is the writer's responsibility to their sister? What's their responsibility to, I guess, the other members of the congregation, the other youth in the congregation? Their responsibility to the police and the criminal justice system, to their parents, their family? I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces to this, and it seems as if the person writing this doesn't really have access to really affect change in any of those systems.
Yeah. I mean, we have seen, there are in so many documentaries and testimonials about these sort of circumstances happening, and the congregation doing the most that they can to avoid it reaching any outside authorities. They like to keep things in-house oftentimes. Not every church has this practice, but oftentimes they want to keep this completely in the hands of like the pastor and the deacons or whoever is heading up that church. So I can absolutely understand the frustration. This is not a situation that I have necessarily been through exactly, but there are similar things in my own background that I can understand. The feelings that you're feeling the anger that you have and the desire for justice that you have for your sister, that's completely understandable.
Yeah.
And I those emotions that you're feeling, I feel, I know exactly how that feels. I wish that I had this perfect advice. I wish
Right?
I had the be all end all, like perfect solution. To be honest, I really don't. But I don't want you to be alone in this either. And I'm glad that you are reaching out to our community and looking for advice. I think that is a better way to do it, because this situation, while maybe in the minds of some of the adults or the individuals that have been involved, maybe in their mind it's over, but for you it's not over. And I completely understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. One piece of this, I guess I want to highlight is just the jumbled up information. I mean, we often hear rape sort of excused as a he said, she said type crime. And I, of course, reject that just whole cloth. But the way you described different churches, it's been documented so many times, the way the Catholic Church in particular is sort of shuffled priests from place to place, and just sort of the habit of these communities often to cover up, to make excuses, to muddy the waters a little bit. I know that when I was a teenager, there was a not entirely different situation involving a youth pastor at the church that I was going to. And it wasn't until I got old enough to use the internet and to be looking at like actual criminal justice records and, court filings and things, to realize that the version of the story that the church was telling everybody after they were sort of forced to was completely inaccurate. And that the stories that we were hearing about a inappropriate tryst between a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old totally covered up the fact that this was a adult man having sex with young boys that were under his care at the church. And the church really didn't address that in any meaningful way. And I know that we're taking individual experiences and trying to map them out. And there's so many people that I'm confident are going to say, well, not my church, or I'm sorry that a few bad apples, or those kinds of things. But the reality is this is happening all over the place. And we're just now beginning to get a sense of the scope of this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of, one of the things that I think is really important when we're talking about this is to really consider the power dynamic too. You mentioned a youth pastor. That's instantly for the children that are under him. That instantly creates a power dynamic, and that
we very much looked up to him literally as our road to salvation.
Right, and so that is something that unfortunately I don't know if that is played into this situation, but that is something that happened that influences this a lot because it's someone you look up to, someone that you might even really, really care about, and you're seeking that approval, or you're, sort of wanting to keep in the spotlight like you have been. So, the power dynamics is very important to consider.
Not to mention just the reality of somebody who is 18 initiating a relationship with a 13-year-old and then, maintaining it until it's 20 and 15, and then asking that 15-year-old to acknowledge their part in all of this.
Right. That enrages me.
Yeah. I don't want to pretend that 15-year-olds don't have sexuality, that 15-year-olds don't have agency, that they don't have an ability to consent, but they do not have the ability to consent to a predator, to somebody who is a quarter older than them, who has this power over them, who should goddamn well know better.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So it's an incredibly frustrating thing. And I guess the thing that we're hitting on is the writer just saying over and over again, I'm angry, I'm upset, and I hear that. I get your disgust. I think that's very human. The question of what do? I need advice. Should I move on? That's a little bit trickier to answer. You know, I don't know the particulars of the situation. Even the things I've omitted from your email leave a lot to the imagination. And so in terms of what might be reportable to the police or actionable in some way is hard to know and really hard to say from out here. I would recommend that because we're talking about a minor, that you involve some form of law enforcement. Whether or not you have proof, you still have an opportunity to file a report. And even if that report doesn't go anywhere, I might suggest that there is a moral responsibility here to do that. Depending on what state you're in, that's going to look a little bit different. The agency involved, I honestly don't want to overstep and tell you how to do that, but I would suggest that whether you're talking about the Department of Children and Families or public safety or whoever else might need to be involved, that you make a report to the people that are looking into these kinds of things. Another thing I might recommend is the RAIN Network hotline, which I apologize I don't have in front of me, but we'll make sure to include that in the footnotes for the episode. That's, I believe, RAINN has a hotline that deals with survivors of rape and these other forms of abuse and may be able to help direct you in terms of who to make a report to and what that might look like. But finally, as far as moving on, you know, I think it's about accepting what happened, acknowledging your role in all of this, which is to say what you can and do not have the power to do over this situation, what you can fix and what you can't, what you can be responsible for and what you just can't do anything about. But ultimately, it is going to be a real challenge. And I know that all of this is mixed up in what sounds like a very complicated family dynamic with a lot of religion and a lot of pressure and expectation to conform and these different things. So it certainly is a lot to sort out. And I would hope that you're not trying to do so on your own. That you are working with some sort of support group or therapist or things along those lines. And so I, of course, want to recommend Recovering from Religion at times like this, that their hotline and chat rooms and things can be a great source of support as you maybe look for something a little more long-term. But really no winners in this story. No. Yeah, even in the event of an arrest or something along those lines, it's hard to imagine this as a slam dunk situation for anybody.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the last couple of things I wanted to ask you about as it regards to binders is just any pro tips you might have for young folks who are watching this now to know, you know, how young is too young, what's appropriate. Can you talk to your parents about these things? I mean, if you are 13, 14, 15 and you're starting to have these kinds of thoughts, who do you even talk to about it?
Well, hopefully you can talk to your parents.
Yeah.
If you cannot, then I would suggest reaching out to, I don't know if you have like a school counselor that you can talk to. I definitely recommend speaking with qualified individuals who are able to address those issues, because there are some people who, because of health reasons, cannot bind. And if you're going to start binding, I hope that you do it safely and if you pay attention to your body. If you get a binder, if you start that process, don't do the home remedies as much as you want to. I understand how crippling dysphoria can be, but you really are putting yourself at risk. And I would hate for a home remedy to go bad and lead to a health problem, which means you can't bind in the future. That does happen sometimes. So find someone who you trust. Find someone who you can trust, whether that be, like I said, a school counselor or hopefully it's your parents. I really hope it's your parents. An aunt, whatever, just find them, talk to them, and see if you aren't able to buy yourself a binder. Is someone willing to buy a binder for you? Reach out to the trans community and see, because actually I've seen a lot of us in the trans community and the non-binary community, whenever we don't need a binder anymore, we'll give it away for free. So that you can find, like on Facebook, there's a lot of groups for non-binary and trans people who want to bind. You can find binders that people will just give to you. So if you can't afford a binder, that's one of the things that I would recommend. I'm sure that there is a point where you would be too young. It would probably not be in your best interest. I would imagine after 15 at least, you're probably okay. I would imagine that that's a good time for you to start doing it if you're wanting to. But
especially if you're already working with your parents. So I guess I would say for parents, know your shit, when you're having these conversations with your children, and I absolutely encourage you to be having these conversations with your children. I know it is uncomfortable oftentimes, and I know that it's uncomfortable for them as well. And oftentimes teenagers don't want to be having these conversations. As much as your trans kid might be delighted to know that they have an ally in you, as much as your cis kid would be delighted to know that they have an ally in you, it can be so difficult when you start from scratch, when you haven't been having these important conversations and have just been waiting for things to come up organically. I would very much encourage you to be intentional, whether we're talking about porn or the way we dress or our gender identities or any of these kinds of things, that you are in regular dialogue just so that they know that they can come to you. Beyond that, I might recommend Sex Positive Families as a really great resource for how to talk to your kids about some of these important issues. And they've certainly joined us on the show before and do some really beautiful work. Other than that, do you have any advice for maybe parents out there, perhaps of queer youth that are beginning to be interested in binding, or if they don't even know if their kids might be thinking about these things?
The best thing you can do is let your children know that it is okay for them to talk to you about these things. There are, we've seen so many situations where a child is like so emotionally just in turmoil because they're so convinced that by telling their parents this, it's going to be an issue, and then the parent has no problem with it. And while I'm really glad that them coming out didn't actually result the way that they thought it might, I really encourage parents to have the conversations with their kids before you're even there. Don't let your children know that if this ever was something that they wanted to do or needed to do, that you're there for them and you want to help them do it safely, because your children are, if there are a lot of trans teens, non-binary teens who end up doing the home methods because they can't talk to their parents about this or whatever. And if you open up that dialogue with your child ahead of time, and if you let them know, hey, if this ever was something that you wanted to do, I'm going to support you, I'm going to help you, we're going to make sure you do it safely, then you have just immediately shown them that you are an ally with them in this, and that's the most important thing. And being an ally to your children is, your children will never have another advocate as strong as you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, it's all very beautifully said, and I definitely want to thank you for being here and talking about all of this with us. I want to encourage folks to check out more of your work. You're, again, on Twitter and on YouTube is Atom the Atheist. I myself am Valence Counseling on Facebook and Instagram, or at valencecounseling.com. And whether you are a dedicated ACA fan or are just stumbling across secular sexuality, I want to make sure that you know that secular sexuality is part of the Atheist Experience Network and is brought to you by the Atheist Community of Austin, as is a number of great YouTube programs, but more than that, a whole community. We are on Facebook. We have the chat here in the YouTube. We've got a Discord, and just so many different ways for people to get connected and to be a part of this community. And I would say that whether this is the only ACA show you watch or one of 10, please get involved. We want to hear from you and have your voice be joined with us and part of all of that. So with that, I want to make sure to thank everybody on the crew, our call screeners, our producers, and our editors that are helping make this show happen. Thank y'all so much. And of course, take a moment to thank each of you for joining us this week, for being a part of this community, for being the wonderful folks that populate it, that make the Discord so interesting, that make the Facebook group so fun. So thank you all so much for watching and tuning in. And I guess at this point, we want to encourage you to go out and give yourself a big old orgasm. Or, better yet, give somebody else one.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.